We got to thank Academy Sports and Outdoors for bringing this interview. They carry a wide selection of the best brands, including Easton, Rawlings, and Wilson, and an Academy. You can shop the latest bats, gloves, cleats, clothing, protective gear, and training equipment, and much, much more. With that, we go to the Buppy's Catering Hotline. There is the great Josh Pate. Josh, good morning, buddy.
I want to specify, David, although I have not been sent copy to read, especially in the state of Texas, Academy rules supreme.
Yes.
My words, not theirs, but especially in the state of Texas. I just want to put that out there.
100%.
No question about it, Josh. And I'll tell you one thing that Academy does not carry, because they pretty much carry everything you could ask for. One thing they do not carry is that shirt that Nuño's wearing.
What are we talking about?
The deep V-neck, banana yellow, that we were going to wait and see till you commented on it, but...
Josh knows fashion. Why would he comment on it?
Well, as a shirt connoisseur that Josh is, we were going to wait, but then I was like, we were talking about it, I said, Josh is too nice to comment on something like that. So there it is. Get used to it, because he says he's going to wear it every time.
I don't know about every, because it takes 12 minutes to do a costume change. So, Josh, the true story behind this is I got this for Christmas a couple years ago. I wore it once or twice on the show, and the reaction that I got was so negative from my children, my wife, even though she bought it, by the way. I think she bought it because it was on my list. From Billy, from the subscribers. I said I would never wear it again until we booked you for this off-season weekly chat, and I think it somehow came up naturally, like, you should wear that yellow shirt. You didn't think I still had it.
Have you ever seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Josh?
I've been on all three, yes, of course, illegally and illegally.
The movie. John Candy, Steve Martin. The shirt offends me. It makes me very angry.
Hey, let me ask you this. First off, Nuño, how far down can you unbutton that thing? If you really wanted to, like, could we go navel? Could you have navel cleavage? Is that how far down it goes? Because I can't see it. I'm not close enough.
There are no buttons, but I can bring it down.
Deepest of deep V-necks. It would make Cliff Kingsbury blush.
Is this the time of year where you're just not nervous about tan line because it's been winter, so everything's the same, you don't have any lines, and you're just letting it hang out?
Yeah, I just let it all hang.
Okay, fair enough. Look, whomst am I to question someone's fashion? Like you said, I've been wearing this T-shirt for 19 years, so who am I to question it?
I will say, for a Cuban, I would expect a little more chest hair and machismo.
I use Veet or Nair to make sure that it's not a problem.
Yeah. I think Gillette was where we were going with that one. By the way, look, I don't want to speak for the Cuban people, but how are you looked on by your fellow man when you reveal something like that?
When I'm in Miami, I'm very cowboy. When I'm here, I'm very Latino. So it kind of depends on the community that I'm in. I'm a hybrid.
So the Cuban chameleon is basically a new brand.
I like this. Yeah.
Can we talk some football?
Sure, or whatever. And we actually have a lot of football to discuss, I think, with Mr. P.
Well, Josh, I want to ask you a question that I started the show off with OB. Just get your thoughts. We kind of went through a list of teams that I think could take a step back next year in college football. Some teams that had really nice seasons. Spitballing here, is there a team or two in your mind you're like, I still got some questions about them if they can do what they just did this prior season?
I'll always go with a team like South Carolina, who they lost a couple of close games. Like those folks were over there thinking, man, we lost by, the skin of our teeth at Alabama. We could have been in the playoff. The LSU game got robbed from us, and they're not totally wrong in thinking that. Okay, well, then I think about the other side of the coin, because there's this theory that a lot of fans, including me, start to slip into, and you convince yourself that wherever you finished last year, that's your starting point for the upcoming year. Even though the record says 0-0, Penn State's going to be a victim of this year. Man, we were in the semifinals last year, so anything less than a national championship trip, that's a bust. That's a bad season. Well, that almost convinces yourself that you're starting there. So I don't think that way. So if you're talking SEC, South Carolina, trust but verify. Tennessee, trust but verify, especially with the offensive line issues potentially there. Now, on the flip side of that coin, they can downplay it all they want to. It would disappoint me if LSU wasn't a playoff team this year. With the lack of continuity returning at the quarterback position in this league and in this sport, if you got Nuss and you just did what they did out of desperation in the portal, you ought to be one of the 12 teams that makes it in. Auburn's got to flip the hourglass over this year. At the very least, they got to be a lot better. So I don't know. They're two ends of that coin, and those are both that I look and I say, is it going to be like it was last year? We'll see.
When I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about I think we know, like you said, what Nuss is going to be. Can LSU get out of this 3-loss regular season or more in a couple instances, but get out? Everyone talks about A&M and that 8-4 cycle, and I think it's warranted. LSU, for all their bravado and outside of that magical 2019, they've been in a pretty extensive 3-loss plus cycle. I think the pressure, do you think the pressure, not hot seat pressure, but do you think Brian Kelly's feeling some sort of pressure in Baton Rouge, like to perform this season?
Yeah. I also don't think he's totally comfortable, not with LSU. I just think he's a guy that's not totally comfortable with the landscape right now. We were down there. I mean, I can share this. So we were down there for the Bama game this past year.
Yeah.
And I was in the building on Friday, and I was just in the vicinity of his office. Wasn't even supposed to be talking to him. Wasn't meeting with him or anything. I was just in the building saying hey to folks. He walks out. We talked for a little while, and like the first sentiment was, man, I cannot wait until we get to a point where this thing makes sense again, where the structure of the sport makes sense again. It's about evaluating, getting them, and developing them, and not looking over your shoulder. And Brian Kelly is just saying the same thing everyone else is. The difference is most places don't have the expectation level that LSU has, because most of their fans haven't seen every one of their head coaches win a national championship since basically, the turn of the millennium. They've seen every one of them win at least a championship. So, yeah, I think he feels pressure, not in a sense that he's scared. I think the thing that's worse than fear is this uncertainty. Like, you do not, as you guys know, as everyone watching knows, you don't handle portal guys like you do high school. You don't have multi-year relationships with those guys. In some cases, you haven't even met them before they commit, sign on the dotted line, whatever. So, think about what a crapshoot that is when your livelihood, career, reputation, whatever's on the line, and you just got to spin the roulette wheel. It used to be, it's always a gamble. There's no sure thing, but man, you can stack the odds in your favor back in the day in traditional recruiting. Now and into the immediate future, it's I hope. I mean, how can you even know what your team is coming out of spring? How can you even know what your team is beginning in fall camp? I will never, ever, ever forget this. Last year, remember your top 10, right? And Florida State was in most people's top 10, if not top 15. And they were in the top 15 if you were low on them. Everyone else had them in the top 10. Yeah. And I'm listening to NFL scouts go in their camp, and they're saying, this is one of the more talented teams that we've seen. Nick Saban goes out there and watches them practice, goes on TV. Yeah, I think that team's right there. I think they may contend for a championship. So it wasn't that they were all lying to us, guys. It was that there's a big difference between collections of ingredients and a meal. There's a big difference between individual pieces and a team. Like when you try and pull apart and it doesn't, that's what a team is. When a train hits go and all the cars clasp, that's because there's connectivity. You can't know if you have it. You cannot know if you have it. So there's pressure, and to some extent, there's not much you can do about it until the season starts.
No, I think it's pretty wild when you're talking about Florida State, right? Because essentially a year ago, Mike Elko was kicking the tires on an old colleague and, Fuller, their defensive coordinator, knowing there's no way I can hire this guy because all that's going to happen is he's going to get a massive raise because he's considered one of the very best in college football. The season they were coming off of, the way that defense played, a year later, less than a calendar year later, he's fired at Florida State. And I think that's a perfect example of you just don't know what to expect. You don't know. Here's the other thing, Josh, right? You don't know what to expect from your opponents because you don't know when they've hit the portal and hit the magic formula or not. So those September games are really dangerous. Those late you don't know, is it going to click early and you run into a buzzsaw, or is it going to click late where like Auburn last year that A&M ran into? So, but I want to go back. You talked about South Carolina and Tennessee. Man, I'm picking South Carolina to keep it going in that deal and Beamer over Heupel in Tennessee, which I wouldn't have thought I would say, but I'm doing it because of Lenora Sellers v. Nico. I'm not there on Nico yet, but I think if there's a couple of quarterbacks in this league that could really alter the trajectory of their teams this year, I think it's Nico, and I think it's a guy right here in College Station, and Marcel Reed. Give me your thoughts on Reed and the Aggies as we enter the spring offseason.
Yeah, there are two classifications of quarterback. One of them is a guy who can carry a team, Cam Newton, freak alien types. And, well, there are three classifications. One of them is he's not good enough, so we don't really spend much time on those guys. Then the other extreme is he can elevate every person around him and a total freak show, exception to the rule. And then there's guys that are good enough. Will Howard was a perfect example of this at Ohio State this year. I don't think Will Howard's winning a national title at Kansas State, but he was good enough if he's plugged into the right situation to do his job. If I'm a Texas A&M fan, that's what I'm asking Marcel Reed to do. And if he delivers above and beyond that, if the development here is such that he just explodes and becomes a megastar, that's great. But man, there's a reason you make documentaries about guys like that, because they're pretty few and far between.
Yeah.
And also, look, and he can come on the show and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Mike Elko's necessarily out to build a team that's purely quarterback-centric. Because if you believe in your overall ability to stack talent and evaluate and develop a program, it's college football. It's not the NFL. I don't think you want your hopes and dreams to hinge on, the healthy ankle or the healthy arm of one guy, when instead you can go about it like Ohio State just did. Like, there was no point in time this year, Saban's best teams at Bama, there were very rarely points in time where you said, boy, if that quarterback went down, this entire thing would blow up. So I want Marcel Reed to make incremental to marginal improvement this year. And then there's a part B to that. I want the collective level of the team to be such that whether I watch him in spring or especially if I watch him week 1 or week 2, I go, I can't put my finger on it. There's no one individual star that's rising above and beyond, but it just feels a little different. That's the surest sign that your program's headed in the right direction.
My last question about A&M.
Okay. Well, we have to hit a break.
Okay, hit a break.
What I was going to say, Josh, is I'd like to talk to you after the show and find a better time because we have hard outs at the end of the hour. And with Billy and us three talking, it's going to go long. So let's talk about it after the show, maybe revisit a 9 o'clock or a 10 o'clock. But we got to hit a break here. Josh, talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
Oh, man, we could have talked
We're going to have 12
for an
seconds.
hour.
No, we have 12 seconds on the other side. We'll be back.
All right,
It's TexAgs
Josh,
Live.
sorry. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya.